This story is from a place in Bihar called Patna. The story is about Shahnaz and Jafaruddin. Shahnaz grew up in Patna surrounded by her loving family. As she blossomed into a young woman, her parents decided it was time to find her a suitable husband. They wanted someone who was not only well educated, but also well settled, a man who could give Shahnaz a life of comfort and happiness. After a long search, they found Jafaruddin, a young man from Lisari, a town not far from Patna. Jafaruddin was an electrical engineer who had secured a prestigious job in Saudi Arabia. This was seen as a golden opportunity, a sign that he was capable of providing a prosperous future. The proposal was made, and Shahnaz's parents agreed it was a perfect match. The wedding was a grand celebration, filled with joy and the promise of a bright future. After marriage, Sheena and Jafaruddin's life together began on a sweet note. The couple seemed happy and life went on smoothly for a while. As time passed, Jafaruddin decided to quit his job in Saudi Arabia and move to Noida with Shahnaz and their two young sons, seeking a fresh start closer to home. Ruddin suggested it was time for a visit home. They had not been back to Patna in a long time, and with Eid on the horizon, it seemed like the perfect opportunity. Besides, Jafaruddin had built a new house right next to Shah's parents' home, using the money he had carefully saved during his years in Saudi Arabia. The thought of celebrating Eid in their new home filled them with joy. On May 1st, they boarded a flight from Delhi to PNA, full of excitement. The next day, on the evening of May 2nd, Jafaruddin took her sons out to do a little shopping, perhaps to buy some special treats or gifts for the upcoming celebration. Later that night, Shahnaz prepared a lavish dinner, including Jafaruddin's favorite chicken biryani, and then he ate dinner with his wife and children and went to bed early. When he opened the door, what he saw was truly horrifying. His father's lifeless body was sprawled on the floor, and beside him was a pressure cooker covered in blood. It looked as if the pressure cooker had been used as a weapon. It was the day before Eid, a time of joy, but now the house was filled with deep grief. The celebration turned into a time of mourning. The police were called. They arrived quickly, took the body, and sent it for a post-mortem. The investigation began immediately. The police began questioning family members and neighbors to gather clues. When they spoke to the son, he told them that he had woken up early and gone to his father's room only to find him lying there lifeless. They asked Shahnaz to explain what had happened that night. She began by saying that earlier in the evening they had gone out together to do some Eid shopping. After returning home, they had dinner as a family, and everything seemed normal. But at around 3 a.m., Shahnaz was found dead. She was suddenly awakened by strange noises. Curious and worried, she got out of bed and went out of her room to check what was going on. As soon as she went out, two strangers suddenly attacked her. They grabbed her roughly and snatched her jewelry, and then one of them covered her nose with his hand. She could feel that something was wrong with her. At first, the police thought it was a case of robbery, but something didn't add up. Except for Shah's necklace, nothing else in the house was stolen, which made the police suspicious. Why would the intruders kill someone without taking anything? Why would the intruders kill someone without taking anything of value? The officers began to consider another motive, suggesting that the attackers hadn't just come to rob the house, but might have had a personal grudge or enmity. One of the officers remarked. The police then began to question everyone closely, trying to dig up any possible leads. They discovered that Jafaruddin, Shah's husband, had spent most of his life outside of Behr, working far away from home, so he had no friends or acquaintances in the area, and as far as anyone knew, no enemies. Despite all the money and jewelry in the house, none of it had been taken. This odd detail made them suspect that something was wrong. To dig deeper, they began to carefully examine all the possible ways someone could have entered or left the house. After careful examination, they realized that the only way to enter the house was through the front door. There were no other entrances or exits. What made things even more curious was that there were no signs of forced entry, no doors were broken, no windows were smashed, and no locks were tampered with. It appeared that whoever had entered the house had done so without any struggle, suggesting that the person may have been familiar with it. This raised the disturbing possibility that the intruder could have been someone in the family. Despite repeatedly questioning Shanaz and other family members, the police were still unable to find any clear answers. They were determined to find a clue. So they asked Shanaz for her cell phone to further their investigation. Without hesitation, Shanaz handed over her iPhone, which she mentioned was a gift from her husband some time ago. The police carefully examined the phone and checked its call records, hoping to find a clue. But even after going through the details, they came up empty. The two children were too young to be capable of such an act, so they were quickly ruled out as suspects, although it is possible for crimes to be committed at any age. The police's main focus turned to Shin, so they decided to investigate quietly and subtly, talking to neighbors and questioning relatives without attracting attention. Without attracting too much attention, they asked relatives about everything from the time Shanaz and Jafar Rudin got married, to why Jafar Rudin had left Saudi Arabia and returned to India, and why he had chosen to live in Noida. During their investigations, the police learned something curious. This was the first time in 2 years that Jafar Rudin had come to celebrate Eid near Shanaz's family home. They couldn't help but wonder why he had chosen to do so. As the investigation progressed this year, more details began to emerge about Shaz and her past, adding layers of complexity to the case. It was discovered that during her school years, Shaz had a boyfriend named Kamal. They spent a lot of time together, and soon their friendship became the talk of the entire school in a somewhat movie-like fashion. They would walk around holding hands, which many people disapproved of. Eventually the teachers, and then the principal, were informed that a boy and a girl were openly showing their love, which was affecting the other students. The principal called both sets of parents and explained that their children's behavior was setting a bad example for others, warning them that this was the time for studying, not for such activities. But when the two did not change their behavior, they were expelled. Kamal later decided to start working to save enough money to marry Shanaz. They were both out of school, and this story became known to the neighbors and everyone around. In the end, Shaz's family discovered her relationship with Kamal, but there was a big problem: money. Shaz's family was well off, while Kamal came from a much poorer background. As time went on, the family became increasingly worried that Shaz's relationship with Kamal might hurt her chances of marrying someone else, so they began looking for a good match for Shanaz, but finding someone nearby was difficult. Finally, through some relatives, they learned of a boy named Jafar Rudin who was an electrical engineer working in Saudi Arabia, earning a good income, and had a solid reputation. When his family met Shanaz, they quickly agreed to the proposal. The marriage was arranged, and Shanaz and Jafar Rudin were married. After the wedding, Jafar Rudin returned to Saudi Arabia, leaving Shabazz and Shanaz to find a new husband. Jafar Rudin returned to Saudi Arabia, leaving Shanaz behind. Meanwhile, Shanaz reconnected with her childhood sweetheart, Kamal, and they slowly became close again. Jafar Rudin spent most of the year in Saudi Arabia, 11 months, and only came home for a month during the holidays, so he was unaware of what was happening during that time. His idea was that his wife and sons would live there, and if they ever needed help, the in-laws would be right next door. With this in mind, he bought the land and built the house. As time went by, Shanaz and Kamal's love grew stronger, and Kamal would come to her house and spend time with her. The elder son, who was becoming more mature and learning the difference between right and wrong, began to notice that something was not right between Kamal and his mother. He mentioned Kamal's frequent visits to his father a few times over the phone. This led to arguments between Shanaz and Jafar Rudin over the phone. Jafar Rudin, who was already struggling with work, took a leave of absence and came home to talk to Shanaz. He tried to make her understand that they had 2 children and a whole future together. But Shanaz, blinded by her love for Kamal, could not understand and began to see her husband as an enemy. Despite all his efforts, Jafaruddin could not convince Shanaz to see things his way. He hoped that she would change, but it became clear that she had not changed at all in the end. Jafaruddin decided to leave his job in Saudi Arabia for the sake of his wife. He decided to come to India, and when he did, he joined a company in NOA. This time, he brought his wife and 2 sons from PNA to live with him in NOA. He decided that after moving to NOA, he would not let Shiz go back to PNA. Shanaz stayed in NOA for 2 years, and during this period Jafaruddin slowly started to believe that Shanaz had probably forgotten Kamal and that their relationship was over. He felt that Shanaz's feelings for Kamal had faded. If there was anything suspicious in those 2 years, Jafaruddin would have noticed, but he didn't find anything. Once he was sure that Shanaz had changed and had forgotten Kamal, he decided to celebrate Eid at his in-laws' house for the first time. Jafaruddin had given his wife an iPhone as a gift, and he was sure that there was nothing suspicious on it, but he didn't know that Shanaz was secretly using another phone. Shanaz was keeping this second phone hidden from him, and it had a SIM card registered in someone else's name that Kamal had given her. When Shanaz was alone, she used this hidden phone to talk and message Kamal. Jafaruddin believed that everything was fine and that Shanaz had moved on. Shanaz was thrilled and felt that she had finally escaped her troubles. When she found a moment alone at home, she called Kamal and suggested that they use Eid as an opportunity to get rid of Jafaruddin for good. She planned to eliminate him so that they could be together, get married, and live happily ever after. Kamal, who had been eagerly waiting for this chance, immediately agreed. He had already prepared everything and knew exactly what to do. He explained the plan to Shanaz, and they were ready on the morning of May 1st. First, Shanaz and her family flew to Patna that evening. Jafaruddin went shopping for Eid with his sons. As soon as he left, Shanaz called Kamal and invited him to the house. She quietly hid Kamal in a room while Jafaruddin was out. When Jafaruddin returned with his sons, they all ate dinner together, and the sons fell asleep. Shanaz had a plan to attack Jafaruddin. Shanaz had a plan to attack Jafaruddin at night, hoping that the children would not see anything if they stayed asleep. In order to set her plan in motion, she started arguing with Jafaruddin about something unrelated. During the argument, she told him to sleep in the living room in anger. Jafaruddin agreed and said he wouldn't sleep with them, but Jafaruddin had no idea that this was all part of a terrible plan. If you have watched our video so far, please like it and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you. At 3:00 a.m. With Jafaruddin sound asleep, Shanaz quietly brought Kamal out of hiding and fetched a pressure cooker from the kitchen. They decided not to use knives or other sharp tools for fear that they might be traced back to them. Shanaz and Kamal had watched many crime dramas where similar methods were used. They decided that using the heavy pressure cooker would be the quickest. They attacked Jafaruddin while he was asleep, making sure to get it right the first time. After the initial attack, Shanaz and Kamal continued to hit Jafaruddin repeatedly on the head until they were sure he was dead at around 3:30 a.m. They then used a heavy pressure cooker to kill him. 30 a.m. With the entire house still in a deep sleep, Kamal quickly left the house. Shanaz locked the door behind her and quietly waited in her room for the morning to come. She planned to wait until her son woke up and discovered the body, so that when the morning came and her son found the lifeless body, she could put her prepared story into action. She would claim that 2 intruders had broken into the house, attacked her, stolen her necklace, and then killed her husband before fleeing the scene. This was the story Shanaz had meticulously planned, but with nothing stolen except the necklace and no other valuables missing, it was clear that robbery was the motive. Was not the true motive. The nature of the attack and the events that followed revealed that the crime was driven more by personal hatred and revenge than by a desire to steal. The story Shanaz had concocted to mislead the police was very weak, and this weakness quickly led to the exposure of the real culprits. The call records found on this phone became crucial evidence in the investigation. On May 10, 2022, Kamal and Shanaz were arrested. They appeared in court and their trial is still ongoing. Both Shanaz and Kamal are now in Patna jail. I end this tragic incident. The only loss was that of a poor, hard-working man who wanted nothing more than to now their two sons are left without a father. Their father's protective shadow is gone, and it's unclear how long Shanaz and Kamal will remain in prison.